What if I told you I had a front row view for creation? And what if I told you I was part of the conversation? And what if the statement, "Let us make man," found in the first chapter of Genesis, had less inference on any false triune thought patterns wrapped in parenthesis, but more emphasis on your omnipotence and the significance that you would choose to include angels in your design? And what if I watched you paint the sky with stars that shine? Watched as you gathered the galaxies in your grasp and laid the foundations from fountains, crafted mountains from mayhem, and with the same hand scooped up the clay to breathe your ruach into the Adamah. And the Adams of Adam were gathered and fathomed her. Entrance from his side as his bride became prize, as the flesh of his flesh she breathed and came life. And I love the way that she would compliment his completeness. I know some might soon see her as weakness, but his bride was strengthened as she stood strong by his side. But what if the Almighty watched quietly as that serpent slowly slithered and softly whispered lies, and from the first bite of the fruit another tree was being planted in the mind of the great I Am? And what if the fig leaf of that fig tree was but a first foreshadowing of the failure of man to try and cover themselves? But what if I were to tell you there was a much better blanket, but it would require a much better payment? What if before those who would have to paint blood over the doorpost, that very door would one day close its hands around the wooden beams? Would it seem it would hang on the hinges of 9-inch nail-sharp syringes that would pierce the skin of his flesh until he cried, "It is finished," and he took his last breath? And what if in the tomb they placed him in, it was sealed with the Father's stamp of approval? But what if in 3 days? I said, what if in 3 days that grace, I mean grave clothes they laid him in was folded neatly and placed in the proximity of those same angels, one at the head and one at the feet, that would cry, "He is not here. He is risen." And what if I were to tell you that all were forgiven? And what if the picture I am painting is more than a vision, more fact than it was fiction? And what if I were to turn to Yahweh at the apex of the formless and void with the question, what would you call this little lamb, this innocent little lamb that's now covered in blood? He said, "I call it a gift, and I wrapped it in love. His name is Jesus." I said his name is Jesus. And what if I were to tell you that that alone was enough? And for that reason alone, we gonna be all right.